What is up, Green Bay Packers fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Draft, brought to you by Badger State Brewing in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I am your host, Ross Uglem, and this is a rarity because you are getting this episode the day that we recorded it. Why? Oddly enough, he was always on the schedule, but we want to take a look at Washington edge Bralen Trice. Now, Bralen was an interesting one. Certainly somebody that I wanted to see work out in Indianapolis, and his story really is almost even more about not working out and kind of what happened with him. The way he wins, sort of the questionable decisions that I think were kind of made in his draft pre-draft process, whether that was put forward to him by an agent or what have you. But super interesting. We'll get into that kind of in the cons section as we kind of go through Bralen, because nothing that I think that happened in Indianapolis that we know about. You never know how the meetings go with the teams and the meeting with the media and stuff like that. But I would say nothing that happened on the field or in the weigh-in was helpful for Bralen Trice. Pros on film, extremely physical player. And I would say even moving almost directly to a con, sometimes that shows up in not great ways with kind of the wildness that he uses, but ultimately it doesn't matter because we'll talk about the productivity in a little bit. But I mean, he is so like he just is on 11 all the time. And I love that in a pass rusher. Clay Matthews was a lot like that, especially early Clay Matthews, where just like, man, this guy is just cranked all the way up, down in, down out, emptying the clip. And that's certainly how Bralen Trice plays. His hands were extremely violent, and they do disrupt and shock offensive linemen in the run game and pass. He's definitely moving guys off their spot. I mean, when he shoots his hands and hits a spot, he's an impressive player, and you can see that on film in a multitude of ways. And I enjoy watching it for sure. High motor guy, we've already kind of discussed that, but I mean, with these pursuit sacks, the extra sacks, the extra plays that are made downfield, like he's just constantly, he's a coach's dream. I would say he's a guy that coaches are going to push for, because I would guess that his Washington coaches are going to speak highly of him. And when a outside linebacker coach or a pass rush defensive line coach, I guess Rebrovich would be when he watches Bralen Trice, he's going to say, I want this guy. And I'm not sure that that's going to work out. We'll talk about that in the Packers fit part. But I would guess that it's something that, a coach will say, because he is a high motor guy. He is a guy that is just constantly on. And that's whistle to whistle, which is a positive for sure. Speed to power transition is excellent. The bull rush is strong, even when he's not necessarily using his hands and just kind of walking guys back. That is excellent. And when he does get kind of a running start, and that's something he likes to do, oddly enough, for a guy who's not overly long, love to or like to rush from a 2-point stance, even carrying as much weight as he was allegedly carrying. And we'll discuss the allegedly part there, but a lot from a 2-point stance and a lot from a wide alignment. And I think part of that has to do with maybe a lack of flexibility and the inability to line up like in a 6 or a 7 and turn the corner. I mean, he was not necessarily that old style Philadelphia Eagles wide 9, but he was out there, and that was to kind of create himself a path to the quarterback, as opposed to actually being able to turn the corner and run the arc. Okay, plus first step. I wouldn't say it's like elite ball get off, but it's a positive. It's certainly something that, in my notes or what I think of Bralen Trice, that's something that I would grade positively. But it's not like, oh my God, this guy's first step. That's really not how he wins. He's not like a Chop Robinson. Okay. Play strength, excellent in both phases. Very, very rarely is he getting washed. And, again, we'll talk about this weight thing, but a lot of the time it wasn't just taking on tight ends. A lot of the time it was taking on tackles. And, whether he's moving a guy back on a bull rush, or whether he's holding the edge, working down the line as he's supposed to do in run defense, and not a lot of run defense in the Pac-12, but his play strength is legitimate, as is his balance. Those two things are two things that I appreciate for sure. I would say that the counter moves, again, are kind of like the ball get off. His ability to counter in the pass rush game is similar to the ball get off, in that I'll say like it's a plus, but it's not, like, oh my God, this, if the spin doesn't work, well, his inside counter is beautiful. Or if, like his counter game is fine. Now, when you pair his kind of, B minus B, solid B counter game with his A plus effort, that leads to some cleanup sacks. That leads to some cleanup QB hits. That leads to, the quarterback trying to extend the play and not having that work out the way that it might have had Bralen Trice not been there. So you'll see that on film where, his first pass rush move doesn't work, goes to a counter, and then that, in addition to his ability to pursue, his constant and relentless way that he attacks the quarterback, those two work in concert, and it's a positive. It's definitely a plus, on my notes here. I would say, and then, look at productivity. We talked about productivity, and this is not specifically productivity, but we've talked on this show a number of times about Pro Football Focus's grades, and you can have whatever opinion that you want of them, but his pass rush grades, I would say these two things are good. So I set the minimum to 200 snaps, and that still was over 200 edge defenders, not even linemen, just edge defenders. In both years, that was more than 200 edge defenders playing more than 200 pass rush snaps, not just snaps, 200 pass rush snaps. And out of that group, he ranked 10th nationally in 2023 in grade and 4th nationally in 2022 in pass rush grade. Again, not the gospel, but you're talking about a 1%, you're talking about a top 2-3%er. That's what you want if you're going to draft him in the top 60, which is, probably his range, or at least it was his range coming into the NFL Combine. He is a top, from a PFF pass rush grade standpoint, he's a top, 2-3%er. Well, he's a top 1%er in the next stat, which is quarterback pressures. He had 70 pressures in 2022 and 80 pressures in 2023. That is 150 quarterbacks pressures. What does that mean? Hurries, hits, and sacks combined, 150 hurries, hits, or sacks in the last 2 years, which led FBS football, led the Pac-12, led them all. I mean, he was, from a disruption standpoint, the top pass rusher over the last 2 years, and that has value. Now, whether that translates is a question. Whether the athletic ability is in line with that, we talk about so often the relative athletic scores, and people have, varying opinions on how much testing matters. Guys, it matters. It matters at edge. It super matters at edge. You talk about some of the top guys, and of course, bigger, faster, stronger athletes are going to be the ones that do really well. But when we're talking about a position, and tight end is kind of like this too, where the freaks, if you will, the freaks are kind of the most successful dudes, the ones that you are looking for in that spot. Tight ends, freaks do really well, but man, you talk about some of the top guys in the league rushing the passer, and their RAS scores are enormous. Myles Garrett 9.99, Rashawn Gary 9.94, Montez Sweat 9.92, Daniil Hunter 9.91, Brian Burns 9.90, Aiden Hutchinson 9.89, Preston Smith 9.80. If you're Packers fans, Jalen Phillips is super high up there. You go back a little further, Ziggy Ansah 9.76. Folks, it's an important thing. It is an important thing. Josh Sweat 9.68. Kayvon Thibodeau 9.63. Max Crosby 9.65. Trey Hendrickson 9.53. JJ Watt, you go back, 9.74. Bradley Chubb 9.51. You see these 95th plus percentile athletes consistently at the top. Now, are there non-athletes that do a great job? There sure are. Okay, there sure are. So Darius Smith is kind of a non-athlete, and he does a great job rushing the passer. You will see guys that don't, test super well, but I'm not looking at it right now. And I would guess 70 or 80% of the top 10 pass rushers in the league, as far as like pressure rate, are freaks. That would be my guess. If it's not 8 out of 10, and maybe 15 or 16 out of 20, I would guess 80 to 90% of the best guys in the league are super athletes. And I'm not convinced that Bralen Trice is a super athlete. Now, you don't lead college football playing in a Power 5 conference in pressures if you suck at football. And Bralen Trice does not suck at football. He's very, very good at football. But this thing that happened in Indianapolis might have just kicked him out of round one. Why? Going into the cons now. Really, really strange weigh-in at the NFL Combine. Washington, and look, I've been talking about sports information directors maybe not being the most honest cats in the world for a long time, but this one was crazy because I think he actually did trim down, or my God, I would hope he did. Washington listed him at 6'4", 274, so that catches my eye, right? Because we've talked a lot about Packer people, Packer fit. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but ever since, and got a little disagreement on Twitter this morning. It's fine. Ever since, you can look at it two ways. Ever since Brian Gutekunst started, or ever since Mike Pettin started, whichever one you want to believe, they have gone for the bigger edges. You look at kind of their top 125 picks before. Clay was more of an outside linebacker body type. Kyler Fackrell, certainly an outside linebacker body type. Carl Bradford was just straight up undersized. Vince Beagle, many would argue, undersized. And the one guy that they took that was big and they took him high was Nick Perry, and even they asked him to slim down. So they had that kind of smaller archetype gone. As soon as, Goody got there, or as soon as they switched to Mike Pettin, big edges. Rashawn Gary, big. Preston Smith signed big, but then LVN drafted big edges. That's especially in the top 100. They big dudes. So you're looking at listed at 6'4". Okay, that's kind of the Packers line, and then 274. Well, the line for the Packers have been 260 plus, please. And so I'm thinking, all right, interesting. Great grades, great pressure rates. Film is good. Like the way he uses his hands, relentless. All right, love it. And then comes to the combine at 6'3.5", 245. Does no jumps, does no agilities. The agility is not great on tape, and then runs just like an okay 40 time. I think his RAS ended up in the 6s or 7s or whatever. It wasn't great. And so, and honestly, it's a nothing thing, because I love, what they do over there. And I love using those numbers to try and educate fans and point them towards guys that Green Bay is likely to take. But yeah, and he didn't even qualify because he only ran 4.72 is an 84th percentile 40 for an edge, and the 2.74 20, or excuse me, the 1.65 10-yard split is a 77th percentile 10-yard split, which the 10-yard split is more important for the pass rusher than the 40. Well, that's good. Athletes are getting bigger, faster, stronger. Is 77th percentile something to get like super excited about? I don't know. I'll tell you, it's not anything to get super excited about, and that's not verting and not broad jumping and not running the 3-cone and not running the short shuttle. That is something to not get excited about. That raises concerns. Now, a lot of that could be answered at Washington's Pro Day. You certainly can't cheat on a vert. You're not going to be able to cheat on a broad. And teams have their own clocks for the 3-cone. So those numbers are either going to be there or they're not. He wasn't, and so that the other question for me is, I think he did drop weight. I don't think Washington was lying by 30 pounds. Okay, I don't think that's the case. But he wasn't a bendy speed rusher, so why drop the weight? He's going through guys. He's not just like what LVN was this season and what Gary was coming out. He's not just a freak athlete, speed to power bull rusher. He can do that, but that's not the only way he won. Like, he was a hand fighter. He did a lot of really good work. Going working half man, inside moves, outside. He's good. He's good at pass rushing. He's a technician. What are you doing dropping 30 pounds when you're going to try and go through a tackle? And that has been, by the way, Green Bay's preference on rushers. They have preferred the guy that will go, through the tackle, as opposed to the guys that I sometimes like watching that can bend and run the arc and go around a tackle. And look, different strokes for different folks, whatever. That hasn't been the way that Green Bay has done business. But the way that Bralen Trice played football at Washington was the way that Green Bay has done business. Why are you dropping 30 pounds? I don't get it. I don't. And plus, now, we're going to talk about it in a second from a Packers fit perspective. He's too light. Maybe. We're going to talk about that in an episode that you're going to see on Tuesday with Justice Mosqueda, because he's got a little bit of a different theory on that, and I'm maybe starting to possibly believe it. Okay. Lack of length shows up on film. That was confirmed at the combine. He's not 6'4", and he's got 32.5-inch arms, which are short for a defensive end, period. Those are short arms. He plays high, and again, often, like I said, loves the 2-point stance, plays high, and often rushes from a wide alignment because he does not appear to have the ability to bend the edge, to turn the corner. Ankle flex, knee flex, hip flex, that does not appear to be there. So he has to line up wider and kind of get a running start at the corner and trying to beat tackles that way. Otherwise, counter the wide alignment with an inside move, get to the quarterback. Very good at those things. Not trying to hate, but I don't understand the strategy here as far as what he did going into Indianapolis. The Packers fit might not be real great. And I'll give a little preview as to like Justice is thinking. So Justice pointed out on this very channel, talking to Andy, a lot of Packers fans are thinking about the old school way of 4-3 defense. You think about Vonnie Holiday, of course, the GOAT, Reggie White. You think about Sean Jones. You think about, other guys that they drafted. Even Aaron Campman was considered a little bit small. But 4-3 defensive ends, and they drafted some guys that maybe necessarily didn't work out, and like a Michael Montgomery, of course, Jamal Reynolds. Everybody remembers them drafting Jamal Reynolds, but that's a real 4-3 defensive end type. That has not been the case. Okay, the Jets, Robert Saleh running the same defense, just took like a 238-pound pass rusher in the first round in Will McDonald. They have other small pass rushers in Carl Lawson and the other kid that's going to get super paid. Bryce Huff. He's going to get paid. And then you look at what the D'Amico did down in Houston and spending a high pick on a 241-pound pass rusher in Will Anderson and pairing him with a bunch of other guys that don't weigh 260 pounds. Maybe speed rushers are coming to Green Bay. I don't know that for sure. I'm not even predicting that, but I am saying it might be time to just press pause a little bit on the height weight thresholds and see if, even if it's one of those body types that Hafley wants in the room, they might be interested. But what we were working off of, which is, I believe, 3-cone, broad jump for sure. I'll pull it up here from our good friend Jake Morley. By the way, buy the Packer Report draft guide. We've got all of this Packer stuff. So we were working off of 6'4" plus 260 plus 80th percentile broad jump, which would be about a 10-foot generally broad jump. And those are the keys. And then they like I would add to this a 7.05 second 3-cone or less. Jake doesn't have it here, but I would add it if I were doing it. So without those numbers, it's hard to know kind of what the deal is from a fit standpoint, but I don't know. Those things they don't move on, I guess is what I'll say. Height, weight, I'm not sure. Okay. The broad jump thing, explosion, right? That's what your vertical and your broad jump show your explosive metrics and your agility metrics, specifically the 3-cone. They love the 3-cone for pass rushers. And that doesn't change if they're interested in a guy who's maybe, 6'3 3/4 and 251, as opposed to 6'6", 276. They still want guys that can turn. And that has never been, whether it was the Capers, more outside linebacker body types, to the Pettin, more defensive end body types, it hasn't mattered. They love the 3-cone drill and the broad jump. It is important to them. Still, I think he's one of my favorite rushers in the draft. Okay, it's been fun to watch him work. I would say I agree with Pro Football Focus's grading if we're talking about a play-by-play consistency level and his ability to affect the quarterback. I just really enjoy watching him play football, and he's one of my favorite players in the draft, even though he's not aesthetically like the type of rusher that I like, that, is a speed guy or a speed guy with some good moves. And he's not that. He is a go through your face type of guy, but still, I think he'd have to have a lot go right for him at the Washington Pro Day to be even considered to be a Green Bay Packer. And that, by the way, doesn't mean that he's not going to have a successful NFL career somewhere else. But you guys, hopefully, most of you watching the show are Packers fans. And I'm just trying to tell you that unless some things go really well for him at Washington's Pro Day, this nonsense that went on, dropping 30 pounds going into Indianapolis and not running any drills, is not going to help anyone. And again, I mentioned Green Bay has liked edge guys that are 6'4 plus. He's not 270. He isn't anymore. And they like the broad jump in the 3-cone, and we don't have those numbers. We don't know. We don't. Overall grade, I really liked him. He's player 33 overall for me. I think edge 5. Uh, he's going to drop. I don't know how much. I don't think he'll, depending on what happens, I don't think I'll move him off of I don't think I'll move him to round 3. He might be ranked outside my top 64 players. I know that doesn't always make sense, but this is concerning. This is, the short arms, not running the agilities, that kind of stuff. But again, it's like people accuse me a lot of being obsessed with the numbers. He's maybe going to drop half a round for me. And that might seem considerable. Maybe it puts him, Green Bay at 58, take a corner and a tackle, take a really good pass rusher at 58. Don't know. Very interested in his jumps and his agilities at Washington's Pro Day, or we might have, I think, potentially a Kingsley Enagbare situation. Not maybe to the level that Kingsley dropped, but we could. Because, again, pass rusher, edge defender, for me, is the number one athletic testing position. Number one. And I think that, that could potentially be the only path to him for Green Bay. For him to be a Packer would be if he fell. Because as we've seen with Kingsley Enagbare, as we've seen with, even the guys that they target in undrafted free agency, that's when those things, kind of go away. They like a certain kind of tackle in the top 100, but an undrafted free agency, they'll check out a 6'9", 300 million pounds Caleb Jones. They like a certain kind of corner in the top 100, but they'll check out Ladarius Gunter running a 4.7 in undrafted free agency. They really like a certain kind of edge rusher in the top 100, but when a guy as good as Kingsley Enagbare continues to drop, they'll take him in the 5th round because he's just too good at football. There might have to be a drop like that with Bralen Trice for him to be a Green Bay Packer. Guys, thanks so much for watching the show here or potentially listening on the podcast. What can you do for us? Easy. Check me out. I'm at Ross Uglem on X, formerly known as Twitter. Check us out at Packer Report. Becoming a VIP is the number one way to support us. And that first month is $1. You can just kind of see what we're about. If you don't like it, you're welcome to cancel or upgrade to the annual, which is, fewer total dollars if you're on the annual subscription. And there's some really cool perks that come with being a Packer Report member as well. The other thing, guys, is buy the draft guide. This knowledge that you're getting, or this, context that you're getting is going to be all in the Packer Report draft guide. We're going to give you 10% off, promo code DAILY, DAILY. And I'm going to write a couple pieces. There's going to be some Packer specific articles, Packer specific mock draft, player fits for like 300 prospects for Green Bay, rankings. I mean, it's all going to be there. Jake's Packer people, the threat. Like, if you want to be a knowledgeable Packers fan heading into the NFL draft, you got to have it. Other than that, do everything you're supposed to do here. Like, subscribe, get all the wonderful Pack-A-Day podcast that you need. Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody, and go Pack Go.